How to approach today's topic. So one thing to keep in mind today, the use case that I'm going to be demonstrating, some of the techniques that I'll be showing you, it's a single way to approach these features. So there's many ways to use virtually all of the features in MaxQDA. There's no one best style or one way that you have to do things. This is just the particular way that I'm going to demonstrate. So given your data, your team, your methodological approach, any of those things, you're likely going to need to adapt some of this, or some of it might not be directly applicable to your project. So I'm going to do my best to give you a wide view of these tools and then allow you to just grab whatever seems particularly relevant. The last thing, it may be helpful to actually think of these features as a component of a systematic process of data analysis. So not just as sort of a single use feature or sort of something that you'll use one time, but something that you'll continually use throughout your project. And you can almost even think of it as a routine. So it's really, these features really shine with repeated use. And that repeated use allows you to build up some analytical notes, and then more importantly, allows those notes to be comparable across different documents throughout your project. So that's really where these features that I'm going to be showing you today shine. It's if you integrate it with your project management, it will really help things out. All right, so the session goals for today. By the end of today's session, you should have a good feel for all of the different types of memos and some of the ways that you maybe could use them in a project that you're working on or will be working on. You'll also get an idea of how to manage these memos. So I'm going to show you the Memo Manager, where you'll learn how to filter, sort, and search through your memos. And I'm going to clarify the difference between a code comment and a memo. It's pretty straightforward, but it is an important distinction. I'm also going to show you one particular way that you could use code comments to annotate the coding that you do in MaxQDA. And you can use this in a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you how you can annotate just an existing code structure, but I'm also going to show you how you could annotate a sort of skeleton structure and sort of build up sort of an emergent coding scheme with that process. So that will be how we'll close out the session today. All right, so that takes care of that. I'm going to actually open up MaxQDA now. The rest of the session will be demonstrated here. If you would like to follow along with the project, if you like to click through things as I demonstrate, you can open up MaxQDA and open up the example project English Work-Life Balance. That will be the project file that I'll be using for today. I've modified mine slightly so that the display is a little bit cleaner for our purposes today, but you should be able to find all the same data that I have. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and turn these off just to make this a little bit cleaner. So we are looking at the basic display, the basic interface of MaxQDA. If you have a little bit of familiarity, you probably are comfortable with this much. I'm going to start out just kind of giving a general introduction of memos. You can really think of memos as post-it notes. And in fact, actually the icon, you'll see it right here in the document system and in the code system. It actually is a post-it note. That's the icon that represents a memo. And what's really nice about memos is really that sticky aspect. So you are able to essentially stick memos almost anywhere in your project. And that ability to be placed anywhere makes them a really versatile tool. So the first thing I'm going to start out with showing you is just the location of these memos. Where can you actually put them in your project file? And then once we've seen that, we'll go through some of their sort of functionality. But it's important to get an idea of where you can actually attach these, because the specific use case will likely be dependent on where you stick the memo. So we'll start in the document system. And if you're new to MaxQDA, a document system is basically your file manager. And you can think of it the same way that your PC or your Mac works, in that If I close that down, you'll see I have this documents folder. This is kind of like my user folder. Everything exists in here. All my data exists in here. So this is sort of the top level. So if I open this up again, you see my folders grouped within here, and these are different types of data. So interviews, focus groups, video interviews, etc. The top level memo that you can do is right on this line with your document system. And if I hover over it, you'll see I get a cool tooltip that shows me the basic display. But if I double click, I get a window that pops up, and you'll see that this is titled at the top Project Memo. So every project can only have one project memo. It's the highest highest level of your memos. You can think of it as a global memo. It's pretty easy to access because it's at the top level of your document system. So the use case of this is probably likely to be project information. So if you're working individually, it might not be quite as useful, but if you're working in teams, this is exceptionally useful. You can house things like your research questions, your project goals. You can have your team hierarchy, who are the analysts, who's the team lead, who's the project manager. You can have communications. You can have due dates if you have analysts doing work in teams. There's all kinds of functionality that you can have here. And the nice part is that this exists in every project file. So if you have multiple people with the same project file, they're all seeing the same communication from the same source. So that's one great piece of utility with this memo. The next level down would be a document group level memo. So if we see here, we have interviews. If we double click on this, it will open up a new memo. And what you may have noticed is the memo window in MaxQDA has tabs, just like most internet browsers do. So you can actually switch between these. If for some reason you wanted to compare two memos side by side, you can use this undock. And then you have two windows and you can compare side by side. So it'll depend sort of on your viewing setup, but that's one way to do it. So in your document group, you can see that this one is structured. It has some basic information about the interviews. They were conducted in person and in a semi-structured way. So we have some basic information. We also have the specific interview questions that were asked. So this can help if you have team members or if you're passing this project off to someone who was not there during the data collection process. This is a really easy way to familiarize them with the project file. So that's sort of the next level of document memos. One step down from the document group memo is going to be the actual document memos. So here I have two folders, one for interviews in Berlin and one for Hamburg. And if I open this up again, now I have my actual documents. These are my actual interviews. You can see that Mateo's interview is present here in the document browser. And you can see here I have a document memo for each, actually for 4 of the interviews. So if I double click this, here I have my new my document level for Mateo. So I have the interview took place in his home on a Monday afternoon. So I have just some basic information. What's unique to document memos is this field here, the document summary, and you can close and open this. The document summary would happen basically after you have gone through and done the analysis for that particular document. So here we have reference to Mateo is a freelance English teacher, overall satisfied, flexible hours. We get kind of the broad strokes of what this document is about. If you go on to use any of the summary features in MaxQDA that can help you to pull together the analytical work that you've done in the project, you can actually use these fields as sort of organizational tools. You can have them display in columns and rows and things. And so that will help you sort of sort your own analytical notes along with the data of your project. So this piece is unique to the document level memo where you can have this summary. So that takes care of the memos in the document system, the project memo, the document group memo, and the document memo. The next one that we need to look at are in-document memos and in-media memos. So I've got Mateo's interview opened right now. And if I scroll down a ways, I see that there is a memo in line with some of the text. Now, if I were to actually click this memo, you'll see that this highlighted text has been attached to this memo. So here we're going to have quite a bit of a different function as opposed to the document system memos. If I open this one up, these are actual analytical notes. So I've got, it is interesting that when asked about family, Matteo only talked about his girlfriend even after the question was posed again. Other respondents interpreted this question more broadly, et cetera, et cetera. So here we actually have a sort of interesting note that the researcher has made that Matteo's response was unique as compared to the other interviews. So you can contain those within a document. The really nice thing is that you're able, with this viewing strip over here, you can turn this on and off. I like to keep this on. This basically keeps memos and code comments visible. I'm able to see my sort of analytical notes right alongside the actual text. So it gives me that nice viewing space where I can compare sort of my notes about what I'm seeing versus what's actually there in the text. So that's a pretty cool feature. Additionally, Matteo's interview actually has audio with it. So if I open up the audio transcription, let me pull that open again. You can see there's actually a memo in the audio. If I right click and open this memo, you can put memo within media. So if I have a video, if I have an audio recording attached to my interview, I can actually create notes in the timeline. Create memos, I should say, in the timeline that sort of talk about specific things I might see. If there's a video, someone has a particular expression on their face, or their tone of voice is maybe different, or there's an extended pause or something like that. So these can be really useful as well. So what I hope you've seen so far is that there's a lot of utility with these. You can put these in a lot of different places. So now that we've covered document memos, the next piece is to cover code memos. And code memos live down here in your code system. As you do analytical coding, code memos become extremely important. So I have the code here, the parent code work-life balance. That can have a lot of different interpretations. It can have a lot of meanings. You could be approaching it with a particular lens, depending on your approach. And you can define all of those things in the code memo. So here I have just a very basic code definition. This code contains subcodes related to what the respondents are spending their time on. You can see I also have a code summary here. It's blank in this one. Let me show you one that has an example. If I open up amount of hours, you'll see here I have a code definition, a code example. So this would be an actual piece of text. You can see this from the interview with Lynn. And then I have a code summary. So once I've gone through all of the coding with this particular code, I can actually give you the broad strokes of what this code means. Essentially, what I'm seeing is that some partners work part-time, some full-time. Those working full-time complain about having to work long hours and often overtime. So you can put as little or as much into this as you want, as sort of makes sense with your particular project. But code memos are exceptionally important in terms of sort of documenting the actual work that you're doing, giving some sort of explanation as to why these particular codes are attached to the text that you have in your project. So these are really important pieces, especially if you're working in teams or passing this project back and forth between multiple analysts. All right, so code memos. The last type of memo is found up here, the fourth option, memos, something called a free memo. So if I'm gonna go ahead and create one of these. A free memo is not attached to anything. It is free. If you were using a grounded theory approach, this might be useful for you. Basically, this might be questions about your project, thoughts about particular things, that maybe are not attached to any specific piece of data or text in your project file, but just sort of general project notes. So you can keep those in your free memo. So that's all the different types of memos that you can use in MaxQDA, all the different locations that you can attach them. Let me show you real quickly some of the features that the memo editor has. So we'll just take a look here in this new free memo that I created, and we'll start here on this level of the toolbar. This first icon allows you to actually insert a timestamp. So this will take the clock setting on your computer and it will insert a timestamp. So if you are tracing sort of the evolution of a code system or of some notes that you've been taking over time as you get further in your project, you can trace that backwards in very detailed fashion. And it's just very simple to make note of when certain things happened. You can see that you can change the font. You can change the size of the font. You have some text editing options. One that I find particularly useful is the strike through. If you have notes or things that change, rather than deleting it and removing sort of that history, you can just strike through. There's highlighting features, all kinds of text alignment features. If I were to right click, I can insert tables if you like to take notes or keep track of data this way. I can also copy and paste in images or other things like that from other parts of my project file or from things outside. So those are some of the useful features. You can also link memos. So if I were to take this, I'm going to add just some text here. And I can actually link memos together. So if I highlight this text and I right click, I can insert a link here. Then let's open up Mateo's interview and let's highlight Monday afternoon and I will insert a link here. And now I have a hyperlink between my two memos. So if I click this, it will link me to the other memo. So in the course of your project, if you are taking notes and you happen to find maybe some complementary information or complementary notes that you've created or contradictory ones, you can easily link those two together so that you can keep that connection fresh. Additionally, at the top, you'll see that there's these icons that will specify what type of memo you have. And MaxQDA has some templates that are sort of loaded. So it has interesting, if I just open this up, interesting, question, theory, language, methods, research question. And these are all customizable. So if you want to change the meaning of the exclamation point, you can. Additionally, if you're working in teams, you could assign a particular color to a particular analyst so that you can sort of quickly understand who wrote what. This can be kind of helpful. Everything will be stamped with a username. So right now, JR is standing for my name. But that's just an extra level of sort of tracking things there. So here you get a pretty good sense of all of the capabilities of a memo, what you can do in terms of editing and those types of things. So I'm going to go ahead and close these out. Let's say you've gotten to the end of towards the end of your project and you have a significant number of memos. You have lots of in-document memos and you don't want to go through the hassle of finding the document, scrolling through and accessing the memo that way. If you open the Memo tab here and choose the All Memos option, that opens the Memo Manager. And the Memo Manager will allow you to easily sort and filter and search the various memos that you have. So there's ways to change the order from origin to memo icon. You can filter things so you can look for specific users. If you have specific users, if you're doing team-based work, you can do it based on time. If you've made, and this again is coming back to a note at the beginning of the webinar today, this really needs to be a very systematized process. So if you don't use these icons consistently, you're going to sort of minimize the utility that you have in using them to sort and filter things. And again, it's not that you have to use them in this particular way, but you need to have an established way which will help you sort of sort and filter these things as you go. Additionally, let me open that again. You can search in your memo. So there is a text search field. So if I search friend with an asterisk here, that will search friend and the plural friends. And I can search that in my memos, and MaxQDA will return anything that has the word friend in it in my memos. So if I was looking for a particular concept or some kind of vocabulary that I knew would be present, I can easily search. So this is sort of the way that you can start to move about among your memos and try and find sort of the notes and things that you've taken. All right, so that takes us through the memo function. So you've seen where you can apply them, you've seen some of the functionality of the editor, and you've seen how to use the Memo Manager. What we're going to look at now is the difference between code comments and memos. And it's a pretty simple difference, but it's a very important one. So to sort of make this clear, I'm going to go ahead and turn these codes back on so you can see them. And this is just basically hiding whatever color that you don't want to see. So for example, if I come up here, this paragraph 3, has been coded as typical workday and flexibility. If I click on this code, I can see this entire piece of highlighted text here is typical workday. Now, there's no annotation here. I know that because this bubble is hollow. If I wanted to annotate this code, I could double click and my comment box opens, or I can right click and click edit comment. Additionally, something to point out to you, if you see this I box ever in MaxQDA, this is a help link. So if you're unsure what this does, you can click it and it will take you directly to the help page that this feature is located on, and it'll explain what it is that it does. So if you're a new user, always be looking for these I boxes. They can be very helpful to orient yourself. All right, so I have this code here talking about a typical workday. Now, if I wanted to add something extra to this to sort of talk about my rationale for using that particular code or sort of picking out some particular keywords, I could do that here. So for example, if I see in this, I see the word flexible. So I'm just going to use flexible as a keyword. And then I might have a complete sentence about my coding decision here. And when I click OK, you'll see this bubble becomes solid, and you'll see I have my annotation right here in my window. So the nice thing is I can see this again side by side with my piece of text and my annotation. This will also be connected in a tabular view. If you needed to sort of see all of these together, you can pull on these comments, or if you needed to export these someplace else, you could easily do that. So the key difference here between a memo and a code is one, a code comment has to be attached to a coded segment. A memo you can stick just about anywhere. A code comment has to be on a code. The other difference is the length. So if I open this back up, the code comment box is significantly smaller and doesn't have all those fancy editing features. You only have 255 characters in a code comment. It's meant to be a brief annotation. If you need more, you should create a memo attached to that specific piece of text. So code comments are meant to be short, and they're only attached to codes. So that's the chief difference between the two. So here you see one of the really nice sort of documentation or note-taking pieces in that you can actually give some sort of basis for your coding decisions. This can be really helpful if you're working in a team. If you want to do something like intercoder reliability, where you're checking to see, does my coding align with my partners? Or a number of people, are they coding the document the same way? You'll get a percentage, like 85% of the coding decisions are the same. But if you add this annotation to that mix, you'll really be able to get a good sense of where are people's interpretation of my analytical code scheme differing, where is it the same, where are we strong, where do we need some improvement. So in terms of teamwork, this can be a very, very valuable feature. There's also one additional sort of utility I want to show you, that you can actually use this if, in our case, we already had the coding done, we had a coding scheme built up and applied. But if you wanted to work it sort of the other way around, where you were taking very general codes and then annotating those general codes, looking through your code comments, you could build your coding tree from those annotations. So I'm going to show you how you could actually approach that. So I'm going to take a look at a specific word. So I'm going to use in the analysis tab, I'm going to start with a text search and autocode. And I'm just going to use this word friend again, because I know it appears. I'm only going to look in these Berlin interviews just to make this a little bit more condensed. And so I'm going to check this only in activated documents, so I know I'm only looking in the Berlin interviews. And I'm going to search for the word friend. Okay, so MaxQDA has run my search, and it disappeared on me. Here it is. And I have 29 hits in 5 documents. So here's all of the references to the word friend. I'm going to go ahead and auto code this. So it's going to give me, just spit out a generic auto code, any friend. Click OK. This dialog box is basically asking me how much of this do I want to code. I could code just the word, I could code the sentence, the whole chunk. I like to code the whole paragraph because it gives me all the context. So I'm going to go ahead and auto code the whole paragraph. And now I have 19 coded segments. So I can close this. And you see in my code system, I have an auto code for any mention of friend. And here they are, those 19 coded segments. To make this more easily visible, I'm going to change the color to black. And I'm going to turn everything off except for black. And now I can see my one auto-coded segment. And this is just Mateo's interview. I'm sure there's more in here if we would click into the other ones. So I have this sort of general concept of friend, and I want to explore sort of what that might mean and maybe some different ways that I could develop a coding scheme to talk about that, or to sort of categorize that, or to just sort of conceptualize it as I go throughout my project. So what I can actually do is I can come into my auto code and I can annotate here. And if I read through Mateo's response, he's talking about spending some more time together. He's talking about the problems it's defined as the schedules are difficult or things like that. So we might put in here time as a keyword, or schedules as a keyword. And again, it's probably best practice to include a complete sentence, right? Keywords are great, but unfortunately, when we come back to things, it's hard to remember what we meant by keywords. Complete sentences are a lot easier to encapsulate our ideas. So if I click this, okay, I've got my annotation on this code. If I double click my code over here now, I bring up this nice clean table, and I'm going to resize this. And here I can see side by side the preview. Here I have the actual piece of text from the interview, and I have my annotation side by side. And what I could essentially do is annotate all of these auto-coded segments, and I could look for any kind of emergent patterns or themes or concepts, and I could try and sort of categorize those into particular codes. The nice piece about that is having done all of these annotations, I have a really sort of rich basis for why I made the specific decisions that I did. So once you go to sort of talk about, your methods section, if you're writing an academic paper, or sort of trying to explain your rationale for why your project came together the way that it did, you've kind of got enough here that you can fairly easily show your work for what it is that you actually used to develop a particular coding scheme. And again, this is one method of many. This is not any kind of prescriptive best method. This is just one that I have used in the past, and I think is an interesting way to use the annotation features in MaxQDA. So that takes us right about to 30 minutes. I wanted to leave plenty of time at the end for any of your questions.